Hey everybody, how are you doing on today? I tell you, I am just so glad to be with you. Once again, I really am. And you know what? I'm especially glad to be with you on today because we are we are now in the month of April. Can you believe that? We have made it to the fourth month of this year. 2025 is just it seems to be flying pretty quickly in a sense. I mean, it seemed like it was only yesterday we were saying Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and all that kind of junk. And now here we are in the month of April with spring being well underway, and we are only a couple of weeks away from Easter. You know, Easter is coming up later this month. And so everybody's gonna be getting ready for the Easter egg hunts, if there will be any Easter egg hunts, because to be honest with you, with the egg prices being what they are and the scarcity of eggs on top of that, I don't see how in the world anybody is going to be able to conduct a whole lot of Easter egg hunts this year. But I'm sure that people will be able to improvise in some form or fashion. Nevertheless, it is truly a, a pleasure to be with you. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I really do appreciate it. And welcome to another episode of TJ's Topics. And of course, I am TJ. I consider it a joy, an honor, and a privilege to be able to come into your presence on any given occasion. Now, as we are entering the month of April, and this month actually marks a significant milestone in my life, that being the 20th anniversary since I departed from a church that I was a member of in the past, which was my parents' church, and they still attend there. But I left there 20 years ago this month. I was 25 years old. So this marks the 20th anniversary since I left my parents' church. And since then, I have found it much easier to walk away from religious establishments because let's face it, I mean, it's like the church has a way of wanting to control the narrative in people's lives to a certain extent. You know, they want to control the way you think and the way you believe and understand. They want to interpret things in a manner that is more conducive for keeping them in a good place, and keeping people from wanting to, deviate from their standard of you know teaching and preaching and believing. Because see, here's the thing. um the older you get, the more you become aware of certain things. And when you're young, you tend to go along with a lot of stuff because that's what you were taught, by people whom you loved, looked up to, and trusted. But as you become of age and you begin to realize that not everything folks said and not everything that you were taught in early childhood was 100% accurate, then it causes you to begin to question a lot of things, to the point where you begin to wonder, I mean, what is the truth? I mean, because you've been lied to your whole life about so much. And even if it wasn't a lie, you were fed a lot of misinformation. It may not necessarily have been a lie per se, but it wasn't totally accurate. There may have been some truth to it, but there were a whole lot of discrepancies mixed in with it. And that's something that I began to become aware of in my late 20s, with regards to reading the scriptures. I began to discover certain things in the Bible that just seemed to not add up, and when I tried to present that argument to the church that I was a member of at that time, after the church that I left, then I was met with some criticism, and it wasn't very pleasant. So, but anyway, that's what we're going to discuss today for a few moments. Empowerment comes from thinking for oneself, for yourself, thinking for yourself. I'm telling you, that's a good thing to do. Empowerment comes from thinking for yourself. And believe me, I have been able to achieve a greater sense of empowerment over the last 2 decades as a result of thinking for myself. Not necessarily going along with the crowd on everything like I used to, because I thought that by going along with them, it was ultimately going to benefit me. But I found out later on that going along with the crowd, it didn't help me any kind of way, and it won't help you either if you're doing it. Yeah, you can go along with them if you want to. You can rip and run up down the street with them. You can sit up in all the conferences and the seminars, and you can participate in all of the functions. You can be a part of all the programs and the services, and you can serve in all the various ministries and auxiliaries, and give all your time, your talent, and what they would refer to as your treasure, that treasure being your hard-earned money. You can do all of that and still not come out on top. And I know from personal experience, because I've been there. And when you come to that realization, it really, it makes you feel some kind of way. It really does. And Lord knows I just, I would hate to keep going down that path. I knew that I had to do something different. And so when I started thinking for myself, when I started questioning some of the things that I had been taught ever since I was a child, and when I started doing research for me, not relying upon what the preacher said or what the deacon said or what the usher said, the choir member said, and all these other folks said. But when I started researching and studying and tapping into various resources, that's when I was able to learn some stuff. Matter of fact, I learned a lot more by doing that than I ever did by going along with what I was taught in Sunday school or Bible study or or anything, any of that. I mean, and don't get me wrong, the scriptures are very, very useful, for certain aspects of our lives. They can come in handy, and I believe that the scriptures hold certain keys to us living a good life, in terms of knowing how to treat our fellow man, how to love our neighbors, ourselves, and, giving to the poor, looking out for those who are less fortunate, being a blessing to those who don't have much. Principles like that, those are always good to live by. But now, governing what people do in the privacy of their own home, how people handle their own money that they worked for, and who you should associate with and who you shouldn't, who you should be with and who you shouldn't. I mean, those are personal matters. Those are choices that each individual has to make for themselves. And you don't need others trying to dictate what you do with your life based on what they read in a book. Because see, you can read that book for yourself. You don't need somebody else telling you what a book says about how you need to live when you have the ability to pick up that same book and read it for yourself and allow the Spirit to interpret to you exactly what it means and how you can apply it to your life. You can do that for yourself. You don't have to necessarily be in a building, because look, the scriptures tell us that the Spirit of God does not dwell in temples made with men's hands. That would be the cathedral or the sanctuary, what we call the church, because we are the church. The church is in us. And the Spirit of God is in us. So we're the temple, because that building can be torn down. It can be bulldozed. It can be burned to the ground. A tornado can come along and knock it down. If it's bad enough, earthquake can shake it down. I mean, a lot of things can happen. It can be flooded out. Water can get in there and damage everything. A lot can happen to a building. But what about us? If we are the temple of God and the Spirit dwells in us, and see, thinking for yourself will help you to come to that conclusion, to that understanding, and being able to, being able to make choices as to how you're going to live, who you're going to deal with or not deal with, who you're going to surround yourself with. I mean, man, I'm telling you, empowerment comes from thinking for yourself. It's a good feeling. And so that's one reason why I'm very happy today. As I look back over the last 20 years and a little bit longer than that, I'm just grateful for what I have been able to learn and to understand and to grow in the process. And I trust and believe that as you go along in your lifetime, you will begin to grow and be able to know some things, and you'll feel so much better about yourself. You'll gain that same empowerment simply by thinking for yourself. And see, when you think for yourself, you can't be controlled by any system or any group of people, any organization, because you already know the truth that's best for you. And you live your truth. And don't worry about what anybody else got to say. Because look, if they're not putting money in your pocket, they're not paying your bills, they're not paying your rent, your mortgage, they're not putting gas in your car, they're not look, and they're not satisfying any of your needs, be it physical or otherwise. To hell with what they got to talk about. So with that being said, I want to thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of TJ's Topics. And I really enjoyed the little time that we had together. And I tell you, I'm very excited about this month of April, getting close to Easter. And I may have something to say about that too. So stay tuned, okay? Because did Jesus really die on a Friday? Because the church tells us that, from 3 days and 3 nights, Christ would be in the tomb. But we'll talk about that next time, okay? I don't want to get ahead of myself. This is Taryn Jerome Harris reminding you that every round goes higher and higher. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.